Brett Pontecorvo here at livekeyboardist.com, and in today's video I am going to show you how to play MIDI keyboard in Ableton Live. Ableton is a fantastic platform to host your sounds in, as well as to manipulate them spontaneously. So it's a great alternative to Mainstage, and I found it to actually be significantly more stable than Mainstage as well. So let's go ahead and jump right into this. So first of all, one of the questions that you need to be asking yourself if you are considering making the switch or beginning to start running your keyboards in Ableton Live is, what do you need to play MIDI keyboard? So you can use either of these three versions, right? We've got the intro version, the standard version, and the suite version of Ableton Live. Now, intro is limited, but I have to say it is possible to create a live keyboard setup in Ableton using Ableton Intro. You just might need some workarounds, and you will certainly also need some external sounds, because intro is a bit limited in the sounds that it comes with. Now, you can also upgrade to standard, which is enough as well. And if you're somebody who already has contact instruments, or perhaps you have just sounds from something else you've been using, standard is great. Suite is truly a high quality piece of software. This is what I use. It comes with more synthesizers than you will need, fantastic audio effects, and as you can see, they've got, you know, your monthly payment options, or as well as options for just outright purchasing it. So once you've decided which type of software you need, you will need a great MIDI keyboard. Now, I highly recommend the Keylab 88. This is what I personally use. It's built like a tank. Been using it for about 7 years now, and it really is still working quite well. So if you're in the market for a MIDI keyboard, I highly recommend this, and there are links in the description below to all of the things that I'm talking about right now. So if you're looking to get your hands on it, you can do so in the comments. You will also need a USB hub. Now, is this essential? Well, probably not. However, you're going to find that as you're playing MIDI keyboard in Ableton, you're going to start running out of ports. And so this is a great way to not run out of ports. In addition to that, some of the newer machines actually do not even have these types of USBs, and so it will be essential for you to have something. Anchor has fantastic customer service, which I really appreciate. Their packaging is great, which is a small thing, but you know, it counts. And again, this I've been using for a very long time, and it's still running, still stable. Now, the next thing that you're going to need that is a little bit simpler, that you probably already have laying around, is this, a simple MIDI USB cable. Now, this is, it comes with a lot of keyboards. So if you purchase a keyboard, you probably are going to have this. But it's got two sides, right? We've got this side here, the larger side that goes into your USB hub. And we've got this side that goes into the back of your keyboard. You could also use a standard MIDI cable if you have a way to plug that into your computer, but for this setup today, simple USB wire will do. And again, these links are all in the description below. So the next thing that we have to do once we have gotten the software, gotten the pieces of hardware that we need, is to set up our hardware. Now, Ableton makes this pretty easy, so we're going to go ahead and take a look at how to do that. So inside Ableton Live, if you just hit Command comma, it's going to pop open your preferences, and what we need to do is we have to teach Ableton how to interact with our devices. So if we go into the Link MIDI tab, you're going to see a list here of all of my MIDI devices. So we're going to look for the Keylab 88. Now, depending on what keyboard you're using, you're going to be looking for your keyboard's title underneath input. We have to talk about track, sync, and remote. So these are the three types of parameters that Ableton is looking for when you plug a MIDI controller in. So if you turn on track, that's going to tell Ableton that it should receive MIDI notes from your keyboard, which we definitely want, because you can't play keyboard without sending MIDI notes to Ableton. And then sync has to do with making both clocks line up. So I did a review, which I will put in the card above, on the Akai mini keyboard, and that's not the actual technical name, but you'll see it in the video. But basically, that has a knob for tempo built on it. So for that, you want to turn sync on because I want to be able to control Ableton's tempo with my keyboard. Now, the Keylab 88 does not have that functionality, so we're going to keep that turned off. And then remote is what allows you to control Ableton parameters using knobs and faders on your Keylab or whatever controller you are using. So those are your settings for input. We'll also check out our output settings. Now you'll notice that my Keylab output has nothing on. Now this is not typical. This has to do with the Keylab and the way that it's set up. So if you're using maybe a Novation launch key or anything with lights on it that you want to be responding to what you're doing, you need to make sure that you have remote turned on this output, because that's going to allow Ableton to light up those pads for you. And if you want your keyboard and Ableton to be talking, that must be turned on. Now, track is always going to be turned off unless your keyboard has onboard sounds and you're using a MIDI clip to send it over to the instrument itself. So in this case, my Keylab has no onboard sound, so there's no real reason that I would want to have that happen. So those are our preferences. Now, the next thing that we need to do is we need to test and see if it worked. So we could just hit some keys and see if we have sound, but I actually think it's important that we talk a little bit about MIDI signal flow, because this is going to allow you to know where your MIDI's coming from and where it's going to, and eventually problem solve. So I'm going to pull this up here. This is the flow of a MIDI signal, right? We're starting with our MIDI keyboard, which is sending notes and controls to our USB hub. USB hub sending it over to our computer where it arrives in Ableton Live. Now, there are three primary places to see if the MIDI signal flow is working. And the first is in the top right-hand corner of the computer, and this is sort of the global control here. The next is on each channel strip, and then within each instrument rack, there are 1, 2, 3 ways to see where the signal flow of MIDI is going. So we're going to go ahead now and test and see how it worked. Did we do it? Is it working? So here it is. Let's hit a key. Okay, we can see on the top right-hand corner, I've got this light lighting up here. So we know MIDI is making it into Ableton, right? Now, on my MIDI channel strips, the next place is these guys here. So if it's lighting up, it's receiving MIDI. So we know MIDI is making it to the channel strip. Now, the next place is actually down here. Now, if you happen to be in clip view, which is a little bit different, if you happen to see this, and you're like, no clip selected, I can't see my instruments, that's totally fine. And we'll talk about putting instruments in here in a second. But this guy here is going to show you if it's receiving MIDI. And then the instrument itself will show you if it's receiving MIDI. And we'll talk about the chain selectors in a little while, but that is our MIDI signal flow. And so now it is finally time to make some noise, because that is what this is all about. We need to create a MIDI keyboard setup that we can actually play, right? So I've got in here right now the Synth U giant piano. And it's working, but no keyboard setup is really complete with just one sound, right? So I'm going to go ahead here and load in an instance of Contact, and the reason that I'm going to do this is because we want to have some options for what sounds we are creating. So I'm going to have just an E-piano for this particular example, because I feel like piano and E-piano go together nicely. So let's see here. Let's try Blue Ballad. Yeah, that's a nice sound. I can get behind that. All right, so now we have two sounds, but the problem is we have no way to control them. So that brings me to my next point here, which is we need to create a way to turn our sounds on and off. So I'm going to do that here with blue ballad with this contact preset, but you need to also make sure that your MIDI monitors are set to input. So basically what this means is it's always listening and looking for oh, looks like we got a comment from Glenn, who's picked up the Anchor 7-port model from Amazon, which is in silver. Yeah, it's a really solid device. Okay, so we need to turn this on and off. So we're going to go ahead and put this right in an instrument rack, which you can do just by hitting Command G. Okay, so that's your keyboard shortcut, and we want to open up our chain selector. Now, what this does is, I'm going to solo this out, is this takes MIDI and only sends it to one of 128 positions. So I'm going to move my chain from 0 to 1, and you'll notice now I get no sound. But when the chain moves over, I get sound. So what we're going to do is we are going to map this setting here so that when I hit a button, it switches it over. And it's a beautiful thing. So we're going to head and enter MIDI mapping mode, and I'm going to click here and just hit a button on my controller, and we want to set the minimum to 0 and the maximum to 1 so that it sort of just becomes a toggle. So now when I hit the button, it turns on. When I hit it again, looks like it's frozen. Let's try that one more time. So when I hit the button once, set it to 1, exit MIDI mapping mode. All right, so we've got our toggle. So we've got sound off, sound on. Now I actually already have this set up on my other instrument. And so what I've done is I've created a really fast and easy way to layer sounds. And I really like this approach because it's a really tactile way to handle it. Now, you can create a fancy clip setup, just kind of like the Sunday Keys thing where it's got clips all over the screen. But I find that that's just not the most effective if you are playing in situations that are extremely spontaneous. So for me, this makes a little bit more sense. There are certain situations where that type of a setup does make sense, however. So as we're building this, we've actually bumped into another problem, which is now I can turn sounds on and off, but I cannot alter them in any way. And so the way we combat that is by creating an audio script. So I'm deleting these so I can show you the whole process here. If you just hit Command T, it's going to create an audio channel strip for you. And what we want is we want these instrument racks, or instrument channel strips here rather, to send their audio here so that we can do all of the processing in this audio channel strip. So we can do that fast by just selecting these two here, audio 2, and we're just going to choose one audio. And I'm actually going to rename this, just for clarity, pianos. So now, well, we've got no sound, which brings me to a point that I guess I forgot. That monitor must also be set to M. So we have sound, but if I mute this channel strip, we hear nothing. Now we see sound coming out of these channels, but we don't hear them because this is the final path to our master output. So if you're trying to like figure out why you might want to do this, well, it is because it's going to give us the long-term control that we want when we build this out and it becomes more robust. So we're going to go ahead and map this guy to a fader. So now I have control over my volume of two instruments using just one fader, right? Which opens up some possibilities. We can have things turning on and off. And as we do that, I can alter the volume accordingly. But it actually opens up some more possibilities as well, which is that we have this powerful mechanism at hand right here. We have this really powerful, fully functioning DAW, and we're using it as an instrument. So we got to get some effects on this channel so that we can alter our sounds. It's one of the benefits of playing piano through a DAW like this. So there are some essentials that we always want to include. I like to have auto filter on most things because I feel like it changes the quality of the sound very quickly. So here it is fully open, and as I scroll this back, I get a very different sound. Is it good? Is it bad? I don't know. But I like to have it on lots of channel strips. So auto filter. We're also going to do some reverb. Reverb is also essential. So here's dry. So we can really kind of get that verbed out. And then a delay is always really nice to have. Now, some pro tips on delay, if I can find it here. Delay is really nice to have just a touch of feedback, but this modulation matrix is so nice. So what we can do is, here, let's get some delay happening. Turn up the feedback, but one nice way to warm up your sound is if you just change this time modulation to a tiny, tiny amount and choose repitch, what we're going to get is a slight detuning of everything that pops through there. Now, you're not going to probably notice this in the full mix of things, but it's really going to create some warmth. Which is nice. So we got to map these guys now. So this is what we're going to do. Filter frequency right here. We're going to do dry wet right here. And I'm using only the knobs on my keylab. Also good to note that you can set these up differently depending. So when you're seeing these jump back down, it's because of the way that I typically have this set up. I can bring my keyboard in now. You can hear some of that detuning. Now maybe that's just too much delay, so we'll pull some of that out. Now maybe I want to switch back to just piano. I can do that really easily. But it looks like I've turned my volume off. Ha! Whoops. Special times. And so this sort of allows us to have a tactile handle on what's happening. Now, we rebuild this system out for every single category. So if you have synthesizers that are part of your setup, you do the same thing. You drag in a synth, and you would drag in an audio channel strip where you can create one quickly, and you sort of build it out. Now, if you are serious about playing keyboard live, I actually think it's best to use a dedicated controller specifically for controlling your keyboard. Now, I mentioned I play the Keylab 88, but I use a different controller when I'm playing a lot of sets, and that controller that I use all the time is the Novation Launch Control XL. And the reason that I use this is actually not because the Keylab is insufficient, but because the controls are all a lot closer together. So I have this right here. This is my Novation Launch Control XL, and you can see these controls are all close, so I can get my hand on it and I can control more than one knob or fader at the same time, which makes it feel a little bit more like an instrument. And what I have up on the screen right now is actually exactly how I have it mapped. So if this is interesting to you, you could pop a screenshot of it and you can map that for yourself as well. So here's the deal, friends. I've showed you some basics about how to set up a keyboard setup. If you would like to learn more, in the description below, you can actually book a private session with me, and I can walk you through all of this one-to-one. Much of what I do is actually coaching people and how to make their keyboard setup the best that it can be. How do I make it stable? How do I make it functional? So if that person is you, then I want you to go ahead, pop down there into the description and book a session with me. We'll meet on Zoom. It's really a great time, really fun benefits. And it's good to just meet face to face. Something is very special about learning in that context. Now, if any of this gear resonated with you, you can also grab those. You can connect with me further on Facebook, and you can also connect with me here. If you got value out of this video, please click that like and subscribe button. I'm so happy that I get to spend Thursdays with all of you, and I will see you guys next week on Sound Design Thursdays.